Here are the top stories for today, January 7, 2021. The Philippines bans the entry of foreigners from 6 more countries to prevent the entry of the new COVID-19 virus variant. The PNP defends the Makati police in its investigation of the death of flight attendant Christine Dacera. The DILG names 5 NPA members killed in Rizal as part of the CPP, NPA, NDF's death squads. And a coffee variant grown in Davao del Sur is named the best specialty brew in the country. Good day, I am William Theo. Welcome to the PNA Newsroom. The Philippines has placed 6 more countries to the list covered by temporary travel restrictions to prevent the spread of the new strain of coronavirus discovered in the United Kingdom. Presidential spokesperson Harry Roque named these countries as Portugal, India, Finland, Norway, Jordan, and Brazil. The countries join the list of travel restrictions either imposed on travelers from the UK and several countries where the SARS-CoV-2 strain was found. Foreign passengers coming from or who have been to these places within 14 days immediately preceding arrival in the Philippines will be prohibited from entering the country from January 8 to January 15. On the other hand, foreign passengers arriving before January 8 will be required to undergo an absolute facility-based 14-day quarantine period. Filipino citizens arriving during this period will be allowed to enter the country, but they will be required to undergo an absolute 14-day quarantine period. The government is plotting the national vaccine roadmap, which will provide COVID-19 vaccines to up to 70 million Filipinos while making sure that these vaccines are safe for use. Here is our report from Janice Cabe.
The government targets to inoculate about 50 to 70 million individuals this year. National Policy Against COVID-19 Chief Implementer and Vaccine Czar Secretary Carlito Galvez Jr. said the government will carry out a strategic framework of the national vaccine roadmap. Galvez said the government would prioritize the inoculation of healthcare workers as well as members of vulnerable sectors such as senior citizens. It will also initially vaccinate essential workers that are vulnerable and those who belong to the comorbid groups, the overseas Filipino workers, and the remaining workforce in the country. On the other hand, Galvez re-echoed President Rodrigo Duterte's remarks that LGUs will be in charge of identifying and profiling the priority sectors who will initially get COVID-19 jabs. Meanwhile, the private sector will provide support in the procurement of the vaccines as well as the deployment of possible COVID-19 vaccines, particularly in setting up of cold chain logistics. Galvez also assured Filipinos of the safety of the vaccines, saying vaccine candidates undergo strict screening to ensure that they are safe, effective, and affordable. He said all vaccine candidates in the country would undergo stringent regulation screening and should be accredited by the World Health Organization. WHO National Professional Officer Dr. Socorro Escalante cited the key criteria to know whether a country is ready for vaccine deployment. Socorro said the country must have a vaccine deployment plan, should prepare for cold chain logistics for the distribution of vaccines, and initiate a safe monitoring of the vaccines. She noted that President Rodrigo Duterte has signed the executive order authorizing the FDA to grant emergency use authorization for vaccines and also to rely on or to recognize the assessment of these vaccines from other stringent regulatory authorities. For the PNA Newsroom, I'm Janice Cabe.
The Philippines and Colombia will be the first 2 countries to take part in the World Health Organization's Solidarity vaccine trials. National Task Force on COVID-19 Chief Implementer and Vaccine Czar Carlito Galvez Jr. said around 15,000 volunteers will participate in the trials. WHO Western Pacific Coordinator Dr. Socorro Escalante said the trial is expected to begin within the month. She said the WHO Solidarity Trials in the Philippines will inoculate adult volunteers and healthy individuals. She added that the Philippines passed the criteria set by the UN organization wherein the transmission of the virus is ongoing and the readiness of the country's institutions. Escalante, however, declined to identify what vaccine products would be tested in the Philippines. The Philippine National Police said there was no lapse on the part of the Makati City Police in its investigation on the death of flight attendant Christine Angelica Dacera. PNP spokesperson Idelbrandi Usana said they will not fault the local police because they were just doing their job. Usana added that investigators assigned to the case will just continue their work to attain justice for Dacera. This came after the Makati City Prosecutor's Office ordered the release of 3 arrested suspects in the case. The investigating prosecutor also directed the police officers to submit additional evidence such as DNA analysis, toxicology and chemical analysis, and the histopath examination report. The hearing for the preliminary investigation of the case was set for January 13. Dacera was found unconscious inside her room on New Year's Day at the City Garden Grand Hotel in Makati. She was rushed to the hospital where she was declared dead on arrival. The city government of Manila is closing down roads in some parts of the city starting Friday, January 8 until Saturday, January 9 in time for the observance of the Feast of the Black Nazarene. Despite the announced road closure, Manila Public Information Office Chief Julius Leonen clarified that processions are still not allowed due to the COVID-19 pandemic. Leonen added that the Black Nazarenes replicas that are traditionally brought to the Basilica will not be allowed to enter the Quiapo area. MPD Chief General Leo Francisco said they will be deploying more or less 6,000 police plus over 1,000 as force multipliers. Manila Public Employment Service Office personnel will be distributing free face masks on Saturday and will help in reminding the public to follow minimum public health safety protocols. Meanwhile, a maximum of 400 devotees would be allowed inside the Minor Basilica of the Black Nazarene or Quiapo Church in each of the 15 masses to be held during its feast day on Saturday. Alex Irasca, a member of the Technical Working Group of Traslacion 2021, urged those who are unable to go inside the Quiapo Church to attend masses at nearby Santa Cruz and San Sebastian churches. The queuing for those who would like to attend masses inside the Basilica will start at 4 a.m. at Villalobos Street. Quiapo Church Rector Monsignor Hernando Coronel also reiterated his appeal to the people to celebrate the feast in the safety of their houses and watch the Eucharistic celebrations online. Still to come, the DILG names 5 NPA members killed in Rizal as part of the CPP, NPA, and DF's death squads. 2 local officials in Bulacan test positive for COVID-19. More on these when the PNA Newsroom continues.
Sa matinding laban natin sa Coronavirus Disease 2019, sugpuin din natin ang pagkalat ng fake news. Huwag magbahagi ng impormasyon na hindi tiyak ang pinagmulan. I-check mabuti ang source ng balita. Kumuha lamang ng impormasyon mula sa mga official channel ng Department of Health. Huwag magpadala sa maling balita, basta't sama-sama at laging handa. Kaya natin to. Isang paalala mula sa DOH, PCOO, KBP at ng himpilang ito. Alamin kung paano ang tamang pagsusuot ng surgical mask. Una, hawakan ang mask sa strap at siguruhing natatakpan nito ang inyong bibig at ilong. Tandaan, ang may kulay na bahagi ng mask ang dapat nasa labas. Ito lamang ang tamang paraan ng pagsuot nito. Ihulma ang nose piece o maliit na metallic strip ayon sa hugis ng inyong ilong. Iwasan ang paghawak sa inyong ilong at bibig. Kung marumi na ang mask, hubarin ito gamit ang strap at itapon ito sa isang basurahan. Siguruhin ang maayos na paghuhugas ng kamay gamit ang sabon at tubig. Ang surgical mask ay dapat gamitin ng mga pasyenteng may sakit sa baga o mga taong mayroong ubo, sipon at lagnat. mga nag-aalaga sa mga may sakit, at mga healthcare at frontline workers. Maaari ring magsuot nito kung kayo ay pupunta sa matataong lugar. Basta't sama-sama at laging handa, kaya natin to! Isang paalala mula sa DOH, PCOO, KBP at ng himpilang ito.
You're still watching the PNA Newsroom. The Department of the Interior and Local Government labeled 5 CPP NPA NDF members killed in a shootout in Rizal last month as part of NPA death squads deployed in southern Luzon. The 5 members were among those tasked by CPP founding chair Jose Maria Sison to assassinate top national and local government leaders and police and military officers. The 5 were killed during legitimate operations in Barangay San Juan, Baras, Rizal last December 17, 2020. DILG Secretary Eduardo Año said this prevention of NPA operations is a victory, especially since this is a direct threat to the lives of the country's leaders and civilians. The DILG chief said the deployment of the NPA death squad intends to bring the NPA's reign of terror in the countryside to these cities. He urged the Commission on Human Rights and even the so-called Makabayan Bloc to condemn the deployment of NPA death squads to prove that they are truly not members or fronts of the CPP. 2 party list lawmakers have filed a measure seeking to defer the scheduled rate hike in Social Security system premium contributions this year. SIBAC party list representatives Eddie Villanueva and Doming Rivera filed House Bill 8304, which seeks to defer the mandated increase to this year. The bill proposes to amend the Social Security Act of 2018, which mandates that the employers' and employees' SSS contributions shall be increased to 8.5% and 4.5% respectively. Villanueva cited that both laborers and employers suffered from the debilitating blow of the pandemic and therefore need reprieve from statutory salary deductions. The deferment in SSS rate hike would mean undiminished level of disposable income, which will help them cope and survive during these hard times. Rivera, for his part, said the bill would serve as a counterpart measure of a similar bill filed by Senator Joel Villanueva at the Senate. The Department of Health in Central Visayas says Central Visayas has so far remained safe from the new variant of SARS-CoV-2 that causes COVID-19. The DOH has submitted to the Philippine Genome Center specimens from individuals who have a history of travel from 21 countries where the new variant has been discovered. Dr. Mary Jean Loreche, DOH-7 Chief Pathologist, said the samples submitted to PGC were for genomic sequencing and the results may be available any part of this week. Loreche said that the entire health department is closely monitoring the new strain. Meantime, she reminded residents to be vigilant and continue to wear face masks and face shields, wash their hands, maintain physical distancing, and to stay at home if no essential things are needed outside. The local government of Siaton in Negros Oriental has closed down its town hall after a health worker tested positive for COVID-19. More on this and other news from the provinces from Benjamin Dog.
Mayor Cesar Fritz Diaz of Siaton, Negros Oriental on Wednesday ordered the temporary closure of the municipal hall for disinfection. This after a male medical health worker tested positive for COVID-19 transacted in one of the offices there recently. All LGU employees of Siaton, excluding those in the Rural Health Unit in the Tabang Center, are advised to undergo home quarantine until further notice and receipt of swab test results of direct contacts of the male health worker. Earlier, the Provincial Treasurer's Office of Negros Oriental was shut down after at least 10 of its personnel tested positive for the coronavirus. In Bulacan, the local chief executive and a councillor in Bukawi town tested positive for COVID-19. Mayor Jose Santiago Jr. and Councillor Alvin Santa Ana admitted on Wednesday that they are both infected with the virus. The mayor asked all those he encountered during the recent days to observe quarantine. The Bukawe Municipal Hall was temporarily closed this week for disinfection. Meanwhile, the City Council of Davao has passed on first reading a COVID-19 immunization ordinance in preparation for the approval of a potential COVID-19 vaccine. The ordinance prepares the city government in purchasing, storing, and administering any COVID-19 vaccine to be approved by the national government in the near future. A task force or a committee will be created to monitor, report, validate, and do any act to ensure the equitable administration of the vaccine as well as to ensure its safety. For the PNA Newsroom, I'm Bench Bondo.
In our business news, Kuala Lumpur-based Juwai IQI Global Chief Economist Shan Said forecast the gross domestic product growth for the Philippines to bounce back between 5.5% and 6% this year. Said said that the local demand and investments in the country will recover this year from the impacts of the COVID-19 pandemic. Said said that the government is trying to bring back macroeconomic stability to drive economic confidence in the landscape. He noted that whoever takes the lead in controlling the virtues get more investment in the country. With inflation increasing in the latter part of 2020, Said believes that policymakers have sufficient room to maneuver fiscal and monetary policy levers. He added that the GDP forecast for the Philippines this year also considers optimism once COVID-19 vaccination program is rolled out in the country. Up next, in the U.S., pro-Trump rioters raid the U.S. Capitol as lawmakers prepare to confirm Joe Biden's electoral victory. And a coffee variant grown in Davao del Sur is named the best specialty brew in the country. The PNA Newsroom returns after these reminders.
Tandaan ang tamang paraan ng paghuhugas at paglilinis ng kamay upang makaiwas sa iba't ibang karamdaman. Basain ng tubig ang mga kamay at sabunin. Unang sabunin ang mga palad at ang likod ng mga kamay. Kuskusin na maigi ang pagitan ng mga daliri at maging ang mga kuko. Isunod ang pagitan ng mga hinlalaki at kuskusin ng paikot ang mga dulo ng mga daliri sa magkabilang palad. Banlawang mabuti ang mga kamay sa malinis na tubig at patuyuin ang mga kamay gamit ang single-use towel o air dryer. Basta't sama-sama at laging handa, kaya natin to! Isang paalala mula sa DOH, PCOO, KBP at ng himpilang ito. Alamin ang tamang paraan ng pag-ubo upang mapigilan ang paglaganap ng Coronavirus Disease 2019. Ugaliing magdala ng panyo o tissue. Kung uubo o babahing, takpan ang buong ilong at bibig gamit ang panyo o tissue. Kung walang dalang panyo o tissue, maaaring gamitin ang braso na pantakip. Kung nakararamdam na kailangan umubo o bumahing, agad na dumistansya sa mga tao sa paligid. Huwag dumura kung saan-saan, gumamit ng tissue at itapon sa basurahan. Ugaliin ang paghuhugas ng kamay at paggamit ng alcohol o hand sanitizer upang mamatay ang mikrobyo. Basta't sama-sama at laging handa, kaya natin to! Isang paalala mula sa DOH, PCOO, KBP at ng himpilang ito.
The Philippine Council for Health Research and Development allayed the public's concern on the safety of COVID-19 vaccines. PCHRD Executive Director Jaime Montoya on Wednesday said every vaccine undergoes clinical trials and reviews prior to getting approved and licensed. Montoya said a vaccine pre-licensure requirement involves 3 phases of clinical trials where the vaccine is continually tested for safety and efficacy. Montoya noted that the government has formed a task group on scientific evaluation and selection to review the results of clinical trials. The task group will ensure the country could choose the best vaccine that is safe and effective. He also pointed out that the Department of Science and Technology has formed a panel of vaccine experts to help in evaluating data. The recommendations and results from clinical trials are further evaluated by the Food and Drug Administration, or FDA. Only if a vaccine benefits outweigh its potential risks can a license be granted, allowing the vaccine to be used by the public. Pro-Trump rioters stormed the U.S. Capitol Thursday morning Manila time as lawmakers were set to sign off on President-elect Joe Biden's electoral victory. Thousands of President Donald Trump supporters clashed with police as protesters breached the Capitol and eventually made their way to the Senate floor. Vice President Mike Pence, who was to preside over the session, was evacuated from the Capitol. A woman was reported shot and killed amid the pandemonium, while multiple police officers have also been injured. Authorities were able to secure the U.S. Capitol hours later. Trump has, for months, alleged that the election he lost to Biden by 7 million votes was rigged, stirring emotions among his supporters with conspiracy theories that have been repeatedly rejected in court. The Justice Department also found no evidence to support his claims of widespread voter fraud. Boracay and Palawan added feathers in their caps after being recognized anew among the best beaches in the world amid the new normal in tourism. White Beach Boracay and El Nido Palawan have placed 2nd and 9th respectively in the Condé Nast Traveler's 25 Best Island Beaches in the World 2020 Reader's Choice Awards list. Condé Nast's Caitlin Morton praised Boracay's white sand, clear waters, lush jungle backdrop, and lively beachside activity. Morton, meanwhile, described Palawan as a destination under the radar despite its wonderful white sand beaches and scenery such as those in El Nido. Both Boracay and El Nido are open to domestic tourists coming from general community quarantine and modified GCQ areas. The Department of Tourism said the inclusion of the two destinations in the prestigious travel publication's annual Reader's Choice Awards is sheer recognition of their unparalleled beauty and uniquely diverse resources. A coffee variety in Davao del Sur made its mark as one of the best specialty coffees in the country. The Arabica coffee grown in the foothills of Mount Apo ranked first in the recently conducted green grading and cupping by licensed Coffee Quality Institute graders. Joe Randy Dubria and his wife Marivic, both coffee farmers from Balutakay, Bansalan Town, garnered a cupping grade of 85.36 and bested around 70 entries nationwide. The Dubria couple attributed their feat to the openness of the Balutakay Coffee Farmers Cooperative to new technologies in coffee farming, harvesting, and processing. The cooperative, with some 250 members, cultivated around 400 hectares of coffee plantation in the foothills of Mount Apo. DA11 Regional Executive Director Ricardo Oñate Jr. lauded the contribution of the Davao coffee farmers for making it big in the domestic and international markets. Let's take another look at today's biggest stories. The Philippines bans the entry of foreigners from 6 more countries to prevent the entry of the new COVID-19 virus variant. The PNP defends the Makati police in its investigation of the death of flight attendant Christine Dacera. The DILG names 5 NPA members killed in Rizal as part of the CPP NPA NDF's death squads. And a coffee variant grown in Davao del Sur is named the best specialty brew in the country. Thank you for watching another episode of the PNA Newsroom. To check more news content, check our webpage or head onto the Philippine News Agency's Facebook and Twitter accounts. For more stories about the government and how it serves Filipinos, look for these hashtags in all of our social media platforms and websites. We are shown on the pages of the PCOO and its attached agencies. Also, watch us on television on PTV4 and IBC 13. And that's your daily dose of the biggest stories that you need to know from the PNA Newsroom. We tell stories that inspire change. I'm William Theo. Good day and stay safe, everyone.